This conversation with Duncan Trussell covers a vast range of topics, from themes about Satanism and the nature of spiritual texts like the Bible to technology, AI, and societal transformation. The discussion weaves through psychedelic experiences, the history and interpretation of religious scriptures, conspiracies, media culture, and personal reflections on mindfulness and happiness. Duncan clarifies that he is not a Satanist despite designing his podcast studio as the Cathedral of Satan, emphasizing it as an aesthetic choice rather than a religious statement. He reflects on attending Anton LaVey's grandson's wedding, where he performed a satanic puppet act. This experience revealed the diversity within Satanism, distinguishing it from common misconceptions. He explains different flavors or interpretations of Satanism, some romantic, viewing Satan as a symbol of rebellion, contrasted against groups like the Satanic Temple. The lighter and humorous tone in describing these experiences stresses the misunderstandings commonly associated with the religion. Duncan recounts his experience drinking absinthe during a drunk history episode, describing it as akin to European tequila, but with a unique psychoactive compound called thujone. He shares vivid memories of how absinthe made his mind remarkably clear but impaired his speech, causing confusion for those around him. The conversation branches into cultural references about absinthe's historical mystique and how certain celebrity-associated brands, like Marilyn Manson's attempt, fared poorly commercially. The dialogue moves toward discussing Marilyn Manson's career trajectory, public controversies, and personal changes. Duncan remarks on the cliches associated with Manson's satanic heavy metal image and how aging and lifestyle shifts altered public perception of him. He touches on the allegations from Evan Rachel Wood, addressing the complex nature of abusive relationships and consent, while introducing the metaphor of vampires only entering where invited to illustrate personal boundaries and influence. Manson's provocative artistry is used as a cultural touchstone throughout the conversation. Duncan reflects on his early days in podcasting, a nascent medium barely recognized at the time, contrasting it with the current highly saturated and commercialized environment. He and the host discuss the pressures of metrics-driven success, algorithmic demands, and content homogenization caused by corporate greed and the influx of celebrity-driven podcasts. This leads to a broader commentary on in-shitification, the reduction of quality and individuality in art and commerce caused by profit motives. The conversation explores the trajectory from traditional media to AI-driven content creation, speculating on its impact on entertainment and employment. Duncan warns about the societal effects of mass unemployment from automation and AI, along with emerging psychological phenomena and AI cults. The discussion touches on the instability of capitalism if income distribution does not adapt. Quantum computing is introduced as a looming technological upheaval that threatens digital privacy and cryptocurrency, potentially exposing hidden information and secrets with far-reaching consequences. The conversation analyzes Peter Thiel's public engagement with Christian apocalyptic themes and transhumanist ideology. Duncan describes Thiel's lecture about the Antichrist as a curious blend of literal biblical interpretation and tech futurism, suggesting a longing to control or mitigate looming apocalyptic events through technology. They debate whether Thiel genuinely believes his eschatological views or if they serve other motives, contextualizing Silicon Valley's emerging religious undercurrents and the use of Christian symbolism in an otherwise secular tech culture. Duncan delves deeply into the nature of magic, defining it through Aleister Crowley's classic description as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. He connects this with the idea that all human actions are magical at a fundamental level, including how thoughts shape reality. He and the host perceive the Bible not as merely literal scripture, but as an encoded grimoire filled with occult teachings and initiatory wisdom. Biblical miracles and Jesus' identity as a possible magician or shaman figure are framed within broader religious and psychedelic traditions, highlighting the Bible's layered symbolism and spiritual potency. They explore the historical and anthropological evidence for the use of psychoactive substances in antiquity, including DMT-like compounds and mushrooms such as Amanita muscaria. The connection between biblical narratives, like the burning bush, and psychedelic experiences is discussed as both metaphor and possibly literal inspiration. The conversation emphasizes how such substances likely shaped early religious thought and mystical revelations, with ancient medical texts revealing widespread drug use for healing and ritual. Duncan encourages approaching religious texts and spiritual traditions with an open, experiential mindset rather than rigid literalism or skepticism. He shares a personal story of reading the Gospel of John on LSD, which transformed his impression of the text into a psychedelic, living experience. This leads to a broader contemplation about the nature of consciousness, initiation, and the profound unknown encoded in spiritual traditions. The conversation addresses how modern perspectives often miss these deeper layers, and that true understanding involves personal engagement beyond external dogma. Duncan compares AI to an invasive, magical entity summoned by powerful technocrats, likening them to warlocks who conjure forces beyond their control. The irreversible presence of AI in society is discussed with some foreboding, as well as the dangers of deep societal fragmentation accelerated by technological and political manipulation. The analogy extends to surveillance technologies and societal control, highlighting a loss of privacy and autonomy while reflecting on the overlapping nature of technology, spirituality, and power. The conversation touches on the dark underbelly of political power, including references to child abuse scandals, intelligence agency recruitment tactics, and blackmail as tools of control. Duncan acknowledges the historic systemic use of coercion and moral compromise in governance, making an unsettling case that this is a centuries-old strategy supporting state survival. They also discuss public skepticism toward government narratives and the erosion of trust, emphasizing the pressures such a crisis creates on society. Duncan reflects on the paradoxes of war, morality, and human behavior. Using historical examples like World War II and firebombings, he questions simplistic good versus evil narratives and the heavy human costs of violence justified by ideology or survival. He points to the psychological dynamics of in-group, out-group thinking as a driver of atrocity, and cites historians who explore these complexities beyond surface-level interpretations. The discussion acknowledges a tragic but persistent human impulse toward conflict as a flawed form of community cohesion. Speculating about the future and the nature of existence, Duncan contemplates simulation theory and the accelerating pace of technological change. He acknowledges the exponential shortening of transformative eras, from agrarian societies to the digital age, raising questions about whether humanity has already passed a technological singularity point. Psychedelic experiences, such as DMT trips, are discussed as potential windows into the code or structure of reality, with playful anecdotes describing visions of intricate machinery and bizarre imagery, emphasizing the fractal and mysterious quality of consciousness itself. Drawing from astronaut experiences and Buddhist teachings, the dialogue emphasizes the realization of interconnectedness that arises from shifting perspectives. The overview effect, from seeing Earth as a unified whole, is likened to spiritual enlightenment, dissolving the illusion of separation. Duncan stresses that communal and relational aspects form the foundation of individual identity and experience, and that recognizing this can foster compassion and reduce suffering. Toward the episode's end, Duncan stresses simple, actionable approaches to reduce anxiety and maximize happiness. Mindfulness and meditation are recommended as techniques for becoming aware of destructive thought patterns and consciously shifting focus away from habitual worry toward constructive or positive mental habits. He compares this mental discipline to a form of magic practiced unconsciously by many, habitually focusing on fear, and advocates reclaiming that power to foster peace and well-being. Throughout the conversation, psychedelics and drugs are framed as tools that humans have always used to alter perception, reduce suffering, and gain insight. The discussion rejects purely negative or moralistic views on drug use, emphasizing that culturally embedded substances, including pharmaceuticals and technology, function as mind-altering agents affecting human consciousness in complex ways. They suggest current prohibitions obscure this deep history and the profound role these substances have played in spiritual and cultural evolution.